Hello makeup lovers, thanks for stepping by. Welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a great day and that you're gonna enjoy this video. So what I want to do today, let me say where this idea came from. So I was watching a video from Kelly Gooch. I'll link her channel down below. Amazing channel, you should definitely check it out if you haven't already. And she did a video of a serious throwback, as she called it, with the Naked palette that I also have here. And she was making a look with it. I think I believe it was two looks. It was two looks. And she did two looks with it. And I was thinking while I watched it, I wonder how the Urban Decay original Naked palette would be received today within the beauty community if it would be released today, you know, like launched today as a new palette. Because this palette is so iconic, it has so much history in the beauty community. It was the first really popular palette and I did buy it because of that, you know. And I was wondering, would it be the same if it would be released today? Of course, you cannot totally compare that because this palette released at a time that eyeshadow palettes were just not in this quality range like they are today. But still, I think it's a nice experiment to do and I want to do it with you today. So I was thinking what I could do to compare it. So I was going back to what I would do if I would get a new palette today. Because what I would usually do, and I think, or at least that's what my feeling tells me, is what the most beauty channels do, is they go and swatch it. I'm gonna spare you that because there are like a million swatch videos of the original Naked palette out there. But in my mind, I would compare it to colors in palettes that I think are of really good quality. So I would go to brands that I find do eyeshadow palettes that I really enjoy, that I really like, and I would compare the shades to similar shades in those palettes. I decided to go for brands that are widely seen as brands that release good eyeshadow palettes, and that doesn't mean that everybody thinks that those are good eyeshadow palettes. And I decided to go with the brands Anastasia Beverly Hills. I decided to go with Juvia's Place, Colourpop, and actually also MAC. MAC was actually not planned, but somehow a palette of them sneaked in there for some reason that I don't know. And then I actually saw a color that I would like to compare, so I just got it in as well. And yeah, that's the palettes I want to compare the Naked palette to. And I want to say also, as a little note on the side, I'm not looking for dupes for the colors in the Naked palette. I'm looking for similar shades that kind of have the same idea behind it, you know, like if I go for a matte brown, a bright matte brown, it doesn't have to be the exact shade, you know, of this brown in the Naked palette in order for me to be able to compare it to my favorite matte browns in other palettes, what I would usually do. So it just has to be similar, the same, you know, use I would get out of this color. I'm explaining myself really bad. I hope you get it. You will see. So let's go into it. So just to let you see, I guess everybody knows it. This is the Naked palette, tada, released just today. And let's go color by color. So I have the color Virgin here. So the color Virgin, I hope you can tell. If not, just pop out your own Naked palette and see. It's kind of like a pearly, slightly peachy rosé satin eyeshadow, which has sheen to it, like a pearly sheen to it. It's not really a matte, so it definitely has a sheen to it. And I did find two colors, or no, actually one color that I could compare it with. That was the color, Giza in the Masquerade palette from Juvia's Place. And I have to say the Giza has maybe more of a satin finish than the Virgin shade, but I think they are comparable. So you definitely see, I hope you see that Giza is, you know, it has more of a shimmer to it. And Virgin, this one, is a bit more matte. And I definitely, you know, acknowledge that. I don't want to compare them directly, but they are similar shades. I would use them similarly in my makeup routines, so I would use them both as highlighter shades actually. And this one here, I think it applies, if you go really close, you can actually see it. This one applies also quite nicely, quite opaque. It just doesn't have as much shimmer as the Giza shade. The color we want to see and compare is the color Sin here. It's kind of like a rosé shimmer color. It's a bit more metallic, or it's actually much more metallic than the color Virgin in here. So it's this metallic rosé shimmer shade. And I found two similar colors in palettes that I really love. And this is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Modern Renaissance palette. So here we go. And here the shade Fermer, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Fermer, is really similar in my opinion. It's also kind of a rosé shimmery shade. And then in the 6-pan palette from Colourpop, Pretty Much, they also have a shade that's really similar. It's called, I believe, Yabish. The swatches, I hope you can see them well. Here we have the color from the Colourpop palette. This is Fermer from the Modern Renaissance palette. And this is the actual shade Sin from the Naked palette. And you can see that actually the Colourpop one is a bit more shiny, is a bit more bright. The Urban Decay one, the Sin one, is also quite shimmery and actually shows up more. It shows up more. The Naked palette shade shows up more than Fermer from the Anastasia Beverly Hills Modern Renaissance palette. So that's interesting. For me, it was interesting to discover. And I think it's really cool that this shade still can compete with the Colourpop shade and the Anastasia Beverly Hills shade. It's quite amazing. So guys, I'm sorry for the color Naked. My cameras just did some funny thing and the clip didn't really record. So we're gonna do this real quick a day later here. And this is the color Naked from the Naked palette. This is the color Berry Mousse from the Juice palette from Julia's Place. This is Burnt Orange and this is Warm Taupe, both from the Modern Renaissance palette. So as you can see, these are not exactly the same types of brown mattes. I was surprised myself that I couldn't find in this palette a matte that was exactly the same like this one, because I found it quite universal. But especially in a comparison with Warm Taupe here in the end of the row, I think you can see that they both go on pretty similarly. Maybe this one a bit more opaque, a bit more pigmented, but this one doesn't have to hide, I think, personally. So this is also a pretty good deal here with the Naked palette and the color Naked. Next one we have is the color Sidecar, which is kind of also, I would say, a rosé tendency to bronze shimmer metallic shade, which I personally really like from this palette. And I did find a shade that is really similar, but has also a little bit of glitter in it, which this one doesn't have. But we just wanted to find shades that are shades that are comparable to the shades we have in here. So I was satisfied with my choice here. And this is the color Birthday Girl from Colourpop that came in the Polite palette or collection of Super Shock shadows from Colourpop, and I can compare Sidecar to this one. So these are the swatches from, this is the color Sidecar from the Naked palette, and this is the color Birthday Girl, the Super Shock shadow from Colourpop. And you can see this one is a bit darker in undertone, while this one is a bit lighter. But I would use them like in the same way in my opinion, and I do think that they are both really comparable, like in the sense of how they go on, how they are pigmented. And I think that's pretty amazing that Sidecar can compare to a Super Shock shadow. Next shade we want to compare is the color Buck, this dark matte brown, or medium to dark matte brown. What's wrong with me today? So this is the shade we want to compare, Buck. And I found the color Warm Taupe in the Modern Renaissance palette that I want to compare it against too. The swatches look like this. This is the color Buck from the Naked palette, and this is the color Warm Taupe from the Modern Renaissance palette. And I do have to say for this comparison that the Modern Renaissance one wins. This one is just doesn't go on as pigmented as the other shades in the Naked palette. This is definitely also a shade I struggled with in the first place with this palette. So there we definitely, I think, have better options than the color Buck in general. Color in the palette, Half Baked, will be also compared to one in the Modern Renaissance one, and it's this color right here, Primavera, because they are both this kind of goldy shimmer that I would use in the same way. So I did compare these two to each other. Just I got of both of them look like this. So this is the one Half Baked from the Naked palette. This is Primavera from the Modern Renaissance palette. They both go on pretty nicely. I would say pretty much the same in kind of pigmentation, in kind of how opaque they go on and how they perform on the eye in my experience as well. So these are pretty similar to each other and they perform really well, both of them in the same level in my opinion. So it's also a pretty good standout for the Naked palette. The color in the palette is the color Smog. This one here, this kind of really bronzy, metallic shimmer brown, which I personally also really like. And I did find a good comparison for it in the Nubian 2 palette from Juvia's Place with the color Sheba. This one right here. Those are the swatches. This is the color Smog from the Naked palette, and this is the color, I always forget the name, Sheba from the Nubian 2 palette from Juvia's Place. So I think they're really similar. I think they could be even dupes, you know, like in terms of how pigmented they are, in terms of how they show up on the skin. I think this one might be a bit darker in the undertone, but they're amazingly similar and also quality. And I think that also here the Naked palette doesn't have to hide, even though it's already that old. One is the color Dark Horse, which is kind of a very dark brown shimmery shade. It's not as shimmery as for example Smog, but it also has shimmer and it's really dark and has this kind of bronzy undertone that I enjoy. I don't go a ton into this color, to be honest, but I did find a good color to compare it with too. And this is like my accident shade with MAC that came from the Risk Taker palette. And this is the color Dangerously Elegant that I want to compare it with too. So these are the swatches of these two colors. This is the color from the Naked palette, Dark Horse, and this is Dangerously Elegant from the Risk Taker palette from MAC. And I know that this one is a little bit darker, but you have to see like the sheen to Dangerously Elegant is way less there as the one from the Naked palette and Dark Horse. And I have to say that when I swatched these two to each other, I thought they're a good comparison because I would use them similarly in my makeup look. But I was really actually shocked that the Dangerously Elegant color from MAC was performing so poorly against the Naked palette. So I was a bit like, wow, okay, MAC is also, you know, I mean, the Risk Taker came out like, I don't really know actually, but not that long ago as a Naked palette, that's for sure. And I am quite impressed that the Naked palette is, in my opinion, much better with the color Dark Horse against the color Dangerously Elegant in the Risk Taker palette. In our palette is the color Toasted, which is kind of a bit coppery, more leaning to the reds, pinky side almost, shimmer shade, which I personally really love. I really like to use that in my looks if I use the Naked palette. And this one I could find a comparison to in the ColourPop palette, which is again the Pretty Much palette. And here I compared it to the shade Envy Me, you know? Oh, it's a board game. Okay. Envy Me, this one here. So these are the swatches. This is from the Naked palette, the color Toasted, and this is the color Envy Me in the Pretty Much palette from ColourPop. And I have to say that actually the one from ColourPop went on a bit more difficult. You can build it up, but this one was just one swipe and this one was 2 swipes. So it says something about the quality. I don't mind to build up a shade if it's worth it, you know. But yeah, if it's in one swipe there, I also appreciate it. In the palette is the color Hustle, which is this also kind of a darker version of the color Toasted. Has the same kind of undertones, it's just a little bit darker. And I found a good comparison for this shade in the Nubian 2 palette from Juvia's Place with the color Leia or Layla. And yeah, let me show you the swatches. And I have to say, this is one of those colors, the color Hustle, that I couldn't really find one that was very similar. So this one is much darker, but they kind of have the same finish. They are both this kind of shimmer shade in a very dark version. But actually they swatch pretty similar. They are really similar in pigmentation for the color they are. And maybe I wouldn't use them like similar in my looks, but I would expect the same performance, if this makes sense. You know what I mean. Second last, we have the color Creep, which is this kind of matte, dark gray, black. I never really could figure out which color this is supposed to be, with a bit of glitter in it. And I couldn't really find a shade like this in my palette, so I decided to compare to a black matte in general, because the glitter I can imagine away, but the way the matte under it, like the matte shade under it goes on, is the focus I had here in this comparison for this shade. And so I compared it to a black matte, which, for example, compared it to the shade Shed in the Saharan palette from Juvia's Place. This is a black matte. These are the swatches, and as you can see, the comparison is pretty strong. So even if we consider this like a matte gray, like really dark matte gray, and this one, or just a gray, they just, you know, there are no comparison. This one performs so much better. No, sorry, this one, what I'm saying, this one, the one from the Juvia's Place palette, performs so much better than this one. And to be honest, you cannot even really see the glitter in it. Like, I never actually liked this color in the palette. If you like this color, if you love this color, I don't want to offend you, it's just my opinion, but I really think this color sucks. To the last color in here, which is the color Gunmetal. Also with this one, it was really difficult to find a matching shade, so I kind of compared it to dark colors which have like a blue shift into them, and of this I could find two. Once in the Dream Street palette from Colourpop, the color Mermaid Boy down here. It doesn't have glitter in it, but it also has this kind of blue shift to it that is almost not there. And then also I compare it to the color Vi. I hope that's how you pronounce it. The color Vi in the Magic palette from Juvia's Place. So these are the swatches. This is the color Gunmetal from the Naked palette, the Vi color from the Juvia's Place palette, and the color Mermaid Boy from the Colourpop palette. So you can see that they are not similar, but they are kind of the same idea, you know, kind of a dark, not shimmer, but like really subtle shimmer with kind of a cool undertone in the blue area. So I think you can compare them to this, but I have to say that actually this one is performing against these two pretty similar. So again, amazing. See now the comparisons I made to the shades that I could find, and I think that there are only just two colors who cannot keep up anymore, and these are the colors Buck and the colors Creep. These two shades, they don't really perform as well as in the other palettes similar colors do. So if I would get this palette new today for these two colors, I would say I have better ones, similar ones in eyeshadow palettes that I just like more. I say from the quality, this one doesn't have to hide. Of course, it's not only the quality in the swatch that matters. It also matters, for example, the color story. And I think from the color story, this today, maybe even back then, this is nothing like crazy new. I still think that there are shades in here which are pretty unique. For example, this color Toasted, I really like it. And yeah, so I think that they did a really good job back then with the color story. But I don't know if people would be maybe today like, this is a bit like neutral. I mean, there's still neutral palettes released today and they are bought like crazy. So I guess people would be happy about this one. But nowadays, for example, especially this year, it's really popular to have neutral palettes with a pop of color. And this one doesn't offer this, for example. I think for the neutral lovers, they would be still very much into that. And another thing is that I think wouldn't be perceived really well today is the finishes. So the mix of the finishes, because you basically only have two mattes, which is the Naked one and the color Buck. And Buck pretty much is a bit of a loser shade for me in this palette. So I would probably be like, where are the other mattes, guys? And so I think this would be a big con nowadays, because nowadays everybody loves their mattes. Everybody thinks, I want my matte. I cannot do a finish look with this because I always have to do the same in the crease. And I do get that. Probably I would also complain about that now if I would receive this as a new palette. So I think it would be a valid point that maybe would make the perception of this palette a little less good. So, but I don't know. What do you think? Would you mind to have only two mattes in here, that one of them doesn't really perform that great? I know I would. I think my verdict on this one is that from quality-wise, how good it wears, it would be still perceived as a really good palette. I don't know if it do this kind of hype it does today, but again, I want to mention that, of course, today we have seen this palette. So we kind of cannot say, oh, today would be exactly the same. But I think that from the quality, I truly think how the shades swatch and how they apply on the eyes and how they are lasting on the eyes, I do think that this palette would be perceived well from neutral lovers. Probably if this would be released today, I would be a bit like, I don't know if I need another neutral palette. But I think in terms of quality, it would stand out to other neutral eyeshadow palettes. At least the ones that I have, which are more recent. So yeah, I think it would be perceived actually pretty well. Maybe the whole thing with the shimmer shades would be a bit of a problem. And yeah, I can see that actually happening today, that people would be like, I don't have enough mattes in here. I don't know. I mean, you could see that with the Naked Heat that released last year, that they actually put already more mattes. So it's definitely a trend that nowadays, as an eyeshadow producer, as a brand that brings us eyeshadows, has to follow kind of. But yeah, besides that, that could be a big minus maybe. But besides that, I think that this palette doesn't have to hide, even nowadays, after 8 years, against the nowadays super popular eyeshadow palettes. I still think that a lot of people still have it in their collection. I think a lot of people love this palette and have it in their collection, especially if you're a neutrals lover. And I do have it in my collection. I'm super happy with it, and I would probably not declutter it at this point. No, I would not. Definitely not declutter it at this point. If you are actually looking for, or if you feel like now inspired to do a look with your Naked palette that maybe has been a bit neglected over the years, then check out definitely this video from Kelly Gooch. She does amazing videos. I will link the video she did with the serious throwback, where she did a get ready with me or do an eye look with me with a Naked palette. I will link it down below the video, and her channel in general. Definitely check her out. She's super nice. She does really good reviews, and yeah, I really only can recommend her. And yeah, so this was my how would the Naked palette be perceived today if it would be released today. Let me know what you think. Do you still have the Naked palette? Do you still use it? Do you think it's as good as the nowadays palettes, or would you say, actually, would you disagree with me and say like, well, I think it's not that good anymore? I'm really curious what you're going to say about that. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and see you soon.